We are going to walk through the Community Accounting module for Drupal. The purpose of this module is to help communities to run an accounting system, in other words, a community currency, and for the developer to design it as they imagine a community currency should run. So it's designed to be experimental. It's very highly configurable. I've been working on this module for about 15 years, and I've done a lot of work on the architecture to provide the right configuration options. I regard it as the best of class of all the software available. Much of the blockchain software available only does accounting, and it only does the back end, so you have to build the user experience. But in Drupal, you configure the user experience out of parts that I have built. Also note that this is mutual credit accounting, which means that when the system starts, every wallet has a balance of 0, and when you make a payment, one balance goes down, which is below 0, and the other balance goes up, which is above 0. You can represent the accounting in different ways, but that's what's going on inside. So let's get straight into it by showing you a transaction. This is the default transaction form. As you can see, there are 3 default transaction forms. This is the one that you cannot delete, and it's the simplest. So you put in a description, an amount. Here we've got it set up to pay in quarters of an hour. I'll show you that later. And we can make a payment between the 2 default wallets which are installed on the system. The transaction has gone straight into pending state. There was no "Are you sure" page because this is the default workflow. This is the workflow you would use if you wanted to make an automatic transaction and you didn't want to check first if it was valid. You just want it to go through or not. Notice here that the transaction has a history which is incomplete because the other party, in this case either party, has yet to sign it, and the transaction is inviting me to sign it here because I am one of the 2 parties, and that's defined by the workflow. So now I'm going to sign the transaction and it moves into completed state. Now we can see that transaction in the overall list of transactions, and we can look at the wallet, and this is the wallet view where you can see that the balances and the transaction history are displayed in different ways. And you can assemble this page out of different components. I'll show you later. The balance history shows time since the creation of the wallet, which was 2nd of September, and then the balance jumped up just a moment ago. So now we're going to look at the currency settings. You saw how the widget defaulted to hours and quarters of an hour, and this is where it's done. There, hours are expressed in bold. 59 says that hours are divided into 60 parts, and divided by 4 means that it should show a drop down with 0, 15, 30 and 45. There's also an option here to allow you to have transactions worth 0. This may sound strange, but the Let's communities who I developed for liked that, and some of them make this to show like a present or a gift or a star or something like that. So the transaction is recorded, but no debt or no units of account are actually transferred. Now we're going to get into the fundamentals in the form of workflows. The module comes installed with 3 workflows. As I said before, one of them is fallback and it can't be deleted or edited, and there are 2 others. So the workflow defines who starts the transaction, if there's a confirmation phase for that person, and then any stages after that which move the transaction between different states. So you can create the transaction in a completed state, or you can create it in a pending state and then define who, probably the counterparty, gets to move the transaction from pending to completed. And it's possible to define more states as well if you want to get into the code. So here's the bill workflow, where the transaction is started by the payee. There's a confirmation page, and then the counterparty moves the transaction to completed state. And there's a list of all the possible states on the system. It's not possible to unerase the transaction on the system, or indeed to erase it, but the payer moves it into completed state, and then admin is allowed to erase it. Each of these transaction workflows produces a default transaction form. And that means that users don't have to try to choose the workflow on the transaction form. So instead you choose between transaction forms, and you can give them appropriate names. For all of those transitions I mentioned, something is triggered when the transition happens. So when the transaction moves from one state to another, here are the transitions, and you can name the transition, and that goes on the button, but then you can also send an email. So now we're going to enable the Form Designer module. And this means instead of default forms, we can customize our own forms, right down to almost writing the HTML. So 2 design forms have been created, or they're provided automatically, and you can see that each one is based on the default workflows. So let's edit the bill designed form. It has a title. Remote transactions, we'll get into those later. Description and a title for links. There you choose the workflow. You could define a menu link. You could preset some of the values on the form, and then you write the form using twig tokens like you would write a template in Drupal. The twig tokens are all there, and they're very easy to use. And the form should be laid out as you see there. Let's see if it works as expected. So here's the form. When it says I, it shows me the wallets that I am holding, and if I'm only holding one wallet, that doesn't appear as a choice, so it simplifies the form. Remember, there's only 2 wallets on the system, so I can only pay the spare wallet, and I can pay them £1.45. Now there's an Are You Sure page, because that's defined by the workflow. And then the transaction moves into pending state, inviting the other user, well, that's me because I own the second wallet, to sign the transaction. I'm going to leave that unsigned for now. So let's look at some other features that Drupal and the mutual credit module provide. So let me show you the balance limits now. So here we set the balance limits at the global level. That means the default balance limits for every wallet. You choose from a range of plugins, and then some of the plugins have configurations. In a mutual credit, it's common to have the same balance limit above and below 0. And so here it's configured to 20 hours. And that means if you try to enter a transaction which puts a wallet balance more than 20 hours above 0 or less than 20 hours below 0, the transaction will fail validation. You can skip the balance limits checks under certain circumstances, and you can also set balance limits for every individual wallet. So let's go and have a look at the wallet's balance limits. I choose a wallet, I edit it, and there are the balance limits. Currently they're not set at all, which means the balance limits are the global ones. Now I'm going to tell you about the Credit Commons. Credit Commons is a protocol for recording transactions using these workflows that I've defined before. This version of the mutual credit module uses the Credit Commons internally, and that enables it easily to talk to a Credit Commons server outside of the website. So you can record transactions with any other site or with any other group that's connected to your Credit Commons tree. To connect to the Credit Commons, you just have a name of your group and a name of the Trunkwards node that you would connect to and its URL. You determine your own exchange rate. In the Credit Commons tree, privacy is built in, but you can also share, if you have higher levels of trust, you could share the account names or the numeric wallet IDs, and that enables autocomplete when people are trying to fill in a transaction form. Notice that the links have been added for the transaction forms. I'm going to bill another member, but they're going to be remote. So we can find the remote member by typing the name of the node. A node is another group on another server, potentially using other software. So it auto-completes for me, and it also completes the name of the account, and we'll bill them an hour. Are you sure? There's the remote name, and look, it's added some transaction fees. Both the trunk admin account and the branch admin account have decided to take a transaction fee. It's too small for you to see it here. It's less than 1 minute in each case. But this means that one transaction has 3 different parts or entries. And there's the pending transaction waiting to be signed by the other party on the other server. And so let's look at the econometrics. Usually the account balances will link to the econometrics. And this page isn't very complete because we've only got one transaction in completed state, but that does enable you to see what the econometrics are all about. These 2 bars represent the only 2 wallets on the system, but normally that would show a sort of inverted pyramid showing the most positive and the most negative wallets. Similarly, we can see the maximum and minimum trades per wallet and the maximum and minimum trade volume, income and expenditure per wallet. And then there's some more stats that happen over time, which again don't work very well when there's only 2 wallets and 1 transaction. So this mutual credit accounting module appears in the Community Forge Hamlets distribution of Drupal. This is the Community Forge website, and there's a map of all the sites that Community Forge hosts which are using the module. Most of them are lets, or in French that's called a CEL, a Système Échange Locaux. If you have a community currency and you want to use Drupal and the software I've just showed you, contact Community Forge and we will set up a site for you and host it for free and maintain it. Of course, donations are welcome. If you think Drupal doesn't meet your needs and you want to do something perhaps more adventurous, or you want to build your own front end, then you can use the Credit Commons protocol for accounting. And that means you use a REST API to read and write to the ledger, and then you could build the rest of the application yourself. This website, creditcommons.net, explains more about the protocol. There's a white paper and it links to the API and documentation. So that's all I've got to show you for today. Thank you for paying attention, and I hope you'll make good use of it.